Okay, imagine this. You pour everything you have into something. I mean, absolute heart and soul, working crazy hours, making all the smart moves you think. And yet, well, success just doesn't quite land.
Yeah. Or maybe it even slips right through your fingers.
Exactly. Or, and this one really gets me sometimes, you see someone else, maybe someone who doesn't seem quite as skilled or frankly doesn't seem to work as hard, just shoot straight to the top.
And you're left standing there just completely baffled.
Hmm.
Like, why them? What secret did they have?
Right. What did they do that I didn't? It's that gnawing feeling, isn't it?
It really is. That feeling that the rules you thought were solid just aren't. That frustration when outcomes just don't seem to match up with effort or logic, it kind of shakes your belief in a predictable world.
Absolutely. And that feeling, that sense of maybe unfairness or just confusion, that's exactly what we're plunging into today. We're doing a deep dive into some really profound insights about risk and luck and how we perceive them.
And we're drawing heavily from a discussion around, well, a truly acclaimed and, let's be honest, pretty provocative book, Fooled by Randomness.
Yeah, and this isn't just about, finance jargon or complex stats. It's really about us as humans and how we constantly, often unconsciously, misinterpret the world around us.
Our mission today, really, is to unpack how uncertainty shapes our lives, how our own minds can play these incredibly clever tricks on us.
And what that means for how we understand success, how we deal with failure, and even how we make everyday decisions.
We want to peel back the layers, look at those hidden forces, randomness, luck that often shape things way more than we like to think.
And the guide on this journey is Nassim Nicholas Taleb, the author of Fooled by Randomness. His core message is, well, it's powerful, maybe a bit unsettling if you like neat stories.
Definitely. He basically says our understanding of success and failure is massively distorted by randomness, by uncertainty. We tell ourselves stories to explain what's often just chance.
We build these elaborate narratives after the fact.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the practical value here is huge. His work helps you spot those ingrained biases we all have about risk, probability, luck, in the real world.
He's not just theorizing. He points out the actual pitfalls,
Right.
and he does it with this distinctive, often really funny commentary on people who take themselves or their expertise maybe a bit too seriously.
Oh, yeah, he skewers that kind of intellectual arrogance. He's got a sharp wit.
He really does. And it's important to understand this book, Fooled by Randomness, it's not like a dry textbook or some step-by-step guide. He calls it a personal essay.
Right. It's more like a journey through his own thoughts, his own struggles, trying to understand and, well, maybe even embrace uncertainty. His observations on risk-taking. It's meant to be enjoyed, but also to really challenge your assumptions.
It makes you think differently about, well, almost everything.
It's definitely a unique read. You feel his own, struggle to avoid being fooled by randomness himself. He loves literature aesthetics, but he knows he can't fully escape being human, being biased.
But he thinks he can manage it, right? Enough to find some peace and make better decisions.
Yeah, that's the goal.
Yeah.
And that very personal, almost stream of consciousness feel, it really comes through.
That rawness definitely connects to his whole approach to knowledge, especially how he wrote the book. He set himself these incredibly strict rules, like almost monastic. First, he said he'd only discuss things he'd personally experienced or ideas he'd developed himself. No, just repeating what others said.
Right, no borrowed wisdom.
Yeah.
And second, he insisted he'd only write about things he understood so deeply he could explain them effortlessly. If it felt like hard work or, boring, he cut it.
He literally stripped out academic jargon, scientific names, library references if they felt forced. This wasn't about impressing
It
anyone.
was about genuine understanding. And even with quotes, he only used ones that just popped into his head naturally from authors he'd really absorbed.
Yeah, he dismisses just grabbing quotes for credibility. His principle was basically only speak if what you have to say is truly better than silence.
And that rigor, you feel it. The insights feel earned, authentic. Not just abstract theories, but lived understanding. It avoids that kind of intellectual posturing you sometimes see.
So with this really honest, almost raw approach, what did he realize about how we see the world? He talks about this epiphany after the book first came out.
Yeah, he realized there are kind of two worlds. There's the world as it actually is, full of randomness and hidden stuff. And then there's the world we perceive.
The predictable world we construct in our heads.
Exactly. Shaped by how our minds interpret the past, which leads straight into this huge bias. Hindsight bias.
Ah, yes, the I knew it all along effect.
Precisely. Past events always look way less random, far more predictable after they've happened. When you look back, all the chaos and uncertainty of the moment just kind of fades.
And you're left with this neat, logical story that makes perfect sense in retrospect.
But it didn't make sense at the time. And the impact of this is huge, especially in fields like finance or economics. People build these completely false stories about why they succeeded or failed, fitting the facts to their narrative after the event.
Taleb found that disconnect just maddening. He called it living in a mad world, fundamentally misunderstanding the role of chance.
He uses the analogy of, say, journalists or experts. Studies show many experts don't actually learn from past mistakes. They can make wrong predictions forever, but still feel totally confident about the next one.
It's not about intelligence, is it? It's a human flaw.
Yeah.
We struggle to truly internalize randomness and our own limits.
Which brings us to a really critical point, maybe uncomfortable for some: the link between effort and outcome. We're all taught hard work, persistence, that's the key.
Necessary, right? But Taleb says they're necessary but not sufficient. That's a crucial distinction.
It really is. You use the lottery ticket analogy. You have to go buy the ticket to have a chance. That's necessary.
Of course. Can't win if you don't play.
But is buying the ticket the reason you won? No. That's pure luck. Buying it was just the precondition.
And this matters more in some areas than others, doesn't it? Like, compare dentistry to, say, trading.
Exactly. In predictable fields like dentistry, skill is paramount. Your dentist's training, their careful work, that directly affects the outcome. You wouldn't want a dentist who just got lucky.
Definitely not.
But in really uncertain fields like finance or venture capital, random factors play a much bigger role. The link between skill and success gets, well, fuzzier.
So hard work is still essential.
Absolutely. Your grandmother was right about that. Discipline is vital. But Taleb argues most huge successes, the career-defining ones, often hinge on just one or two big windows of opportunity.
And if you miss them,
Your whole path can change, no matter how hard you worked. It's about being ready, yes, but also getting that lucky break.
this exposes that logical trap, right? Naive empiricism.
Yeah. Assuming that because successful people share traits like hard work and intelligence, those traits must be the sole cause of their success.
We see the winners and attribute their success to their visible qualities, but we ignore everyone else with the same qualities who didn't make it.
Right. He critiques books like The Millionaire Next Door for this. They looked at common traits of millionaires, persistence, frugality, and said, aha, that's the secret.
But they didn't look at the failures, the thousands of equally persistent, hardworking people who didn't become millionaires. Their stories aren't told.
That's naive empiricism, drawing conclusions from just the survivors. Like risk-taking is common in both huge successes and spectacular failures. The outcome, often random, determines if we call it genius or recklessness.
So how does he demonstrate this beyond just observation? He uses a thought experiment, doesn't he? Like a logical Russian roulette.
Kind of, yeah. He argues you don't always need mountains of data. Sometimes a simple logical experiment shows that chance is a perfectly valid, often more likely explanation.
And the core idea is,
If you take a large enough group of people, even with just average skills in something random like trading, some will inevitably become incredibly successful just by luck. It's almost a statistical certainty in a big enough sample.
someone has to win the lottery, basically.
Pretty much. He applies this to famous investors like Warren Buffett. He suggests that in a huge pool of random investors, someone with Buffett's kind of track record would likely emerge purely by chance eventually.
That doesn't mean Buffett isn't skilled, though.
No, not at all. It just highlights the potentially massive role of luck in those extreme outlier successes. It's about acknowledging that alternative luck-based explanations are always possible, often probable.
Okay, so we misinterpret success, often crediting skill over luck. But why are we so easily fooled? What's this noise in the system? Let's get into part 2, starting with fat tails.
Right. Fat tails is about extreme uncertainty. Think of a standard bell curve. Extreme events are way out on the thin tails. Very rare.
But Taleb says in the real world, those tails are fat.
Exactly. Meaning extreme high-impact events, market crashes, huge discoveries, black swans happen much more often than traditional models predict. They defy the neat symmetry of the bell curve.
And these events disproportionately shape things, but we still find them baffling.
Yeah, they constantly remind us how limited our prediction models are.
Yeah.
We want to categorize and control things, but some things are just wildly random.
Which connects to the cross-sectional problem. And survivorship bias, especially in markets.
Yes, and here's that counterintuitive claim. At any given moment, the richest traders might actually be the worst traders.
How does that work? The richest are the worst.
Because their current success might just mean they were the best fit for the very latest market cycle. Their strategy worked recently. It doesn't mean it's robust, or they have superior long-term skill.
Unlike, say, a great dentist whose skill is consistent year after year.
Precisely. It's that survivorship bias again. We only see the winners of the latest round. We don't see the massive graveyard of traders whose strategies didn't fit this particular cycle.
They failed and disappeared from view.
Exactly. And think about optimism bias. Optimists take more risks. A few win big and become famous. We celebrate them.
But the vast majority of optimistic risk takers fail and vanish. We conveniently forget them.
Right. And this leads to another really interesting, maybe uncomfortable point. Trader loyalty to ideas can be dangerous.
How so?
Taleb noticed traders, when losing, often subconsciously shift their identity. They stop being a trader and suddenly become a long-term investor.
A way to avoid admitting the trade was wrong and cutting losses.
It's often a psychological defense mechanism, delaying the pain instead of sticking to a pre-agreed exit strategy.
He contrasts that with someone like George Soros, right?
Yeah. Regardless of other views on Soros, Taleb admired his ability to completely change his mind, reverse huge positions, admit being wrong instantly without ego. That flexibility is key in a random world. Clinging to a losing idea is deadly.
Okay, let's shift to another trap, the expected value trap. This is about probability versus expectation.
The crucial difference we often miss. Expectation is probability times the outcome.
Give us the gambling analogy.
Okay, imagine a game. You win $1, $999 times out of 1,000. So a 99.9% chance of winning each time. Sounds amazing.
Yeah, almost guaranteed win.
But the one time you lose $10,000. So over 1,000 plays, you win $999, but you lose $10,000 once. Your expected outcome per play is actually negative, about -$9.
Wow. So the high probability of winning is misleading because the rare loss is catastrophic.
Exactly. It's asymmetric odds leading to asymmetric outcomes. Our schooling, often using simple coin flips where wins and losses are equal, doesn't prepare us for this. We mistake high probability for positive expected value.
And this misunderstanding leads to the illusion of information and finding random correlations.
Yes, the danger of data mining. Computers, or even just our brains looking hard enough, precisely. That's how conspiracy theories often work. Finding apparent patterns in random noise, because you're desperately looking for one. Our brains are pattern-matching machines. They will find something eventually.
Like the birthday paradox. It feels unlikely for two people in a small group to share a birthday, but statistically, it's much more probable than intuition suggests.
Exactly. Our intuition about probability is often way off. Taleb argues journalists, even researchers sometimes, fall into this trap if they don't deeply understand statistics and randomness. They find a correlation and declare causation.
Okay, this next one feels very relevant today. The perils of constant monitoring. Checking investments too often.
Oh yeah, he argues it's emotionally toxic.
Yeah.
It's all about noise overwhelming the signal.
The dentist analogy illustrates this perfectly.
Right, so a dentist invests in the stock market. Let's
Yeah.
say it has a 93% chance of going up in any given year. Great long-term bet.
Seems solid.
Okay, if the dentist checks just once a year over 20 years, they'll see maybe 19 good years, 1 bad year. Mostly positive feelings.
Makes sense.
Check monthly. Maybe 8 happy months, 4 sad months. Still mostly positive, but more volatility.
Okay.
Now check daily during trading hours. Roughly 241 up moments, 239 down moments.
Yeah.
Almost 50-50 emotional.
Wow, the frequency changes everything.
Check hourly. It's like 30 parts noise for every 1 part real performance, second by second. Almost 1,800 parts noise to 1 part signal.
So the more you look, the more you just see random fluctuations, not the real trend.
Exactly. And since losses feel about 2.5 times worse than gains, constantly monitoring just burns you out emotionally. Stress, bad decisions, even physiological effects.
What was Taleb's coping mechanism? Reading poetry instead of news.
Yeah, sitting with mathematicians, not traders, avoiding newspapers mostly, filtering out the noise.
The lesson is clear. If you have a good long-term plan, checking less often is better for your sanity. Your perception depends entirely on the frequency.
And this applies to so much more than finance. Diet, exercise, anything with slow progress and short-term fluctuations.
This leads into his critique of modern news, right? Noise versus signal.
Absolutely. He says we get more and more unfiltered, raw information, but less filtered, distilled understanding, more noise, less truth.
Because mainstream journalism is designed to grab attention, not provide deep knowledge.
That's his argument. Catchy headlines sell, thoughtful analysis doesn't necessarily. It's a business based on engagement, not enlightenment.
His take is pretty blunt. News is a business, not a source of knowledge. Avoid it to be smarter.
It's a strong claim, and he sees the consequence on Wall Street, favoring new, hot traders over experienced survivors who understand long-term patterns and distilled thinking. Recency bias rules.
Okay, let's shift gears to part 3. The human element. Our built-in biases, starting with System 1 and System 2 thinking.
Right, the framework popularized by Kahneman and Tversky. System 1 is our fast, intuitive, automatic emotional brain. Gut reactions, snap judgments.
Effortless, associative, often opaque to us.
Exactly. System 2 is the slow, deliberate, logical, effortful part. Conscious reasoning, complex calculations, planning.
And they interact. System 1 learns from experience. System 2 can automate things.
Yeah, like learning chess. Starts as pure System 2 effort, but grandmasters develop System 1 intuition. They feel the right move.
So why are we wired like this? Why does it mess us up in the modern world? It goes back to our evolution, doesn't it?
Totally. Our brains are optimized for survival on the savannah thousands of years ago, not for abstract probability or global finance.
Life was simpler, more immediate. Danger was right there, not a statistical probability.
Precisely. Information was scarce, travel deadly, social circles tiny. Complex math wasn't needed for survival back then. Our genes just haven't caught up with how fast our environment changed.
Which leads to biases when we face modern complexity. And how information is presented matters too. Frequencies versus probabilities.
Big time. 1 in 1,000 people get this.
Yeah.
Feels more real, more graspable to System 1 than a 0.1% chance. It paints a picture.
Our brain isn't one single processor, more like a Swiss Army knife. Lots of tools, not always consistent.
That's one way to think about it, yeah. Different tools for different jobs, optimized for different things, sometimes leading to contradictory choices.
And what about emotions? We usually think of them as irrational interference.
But Taleb and neuroscience argue they're essential for decision-making. Without emotions, we can become paralyzed, unable to make even simple choices.
They're the lubricants of reason.
That's the phrase. The connections from emotional centers to cognitive centers are strong. We often feel first, then reason finds an explanation. So our risk perception is deeply emotional.
And this leads to those mental shortcuts, heuristics, which cause biases.
Right. Let's quickly run through some key ones. Availability. We judge frequency by how easily something comes to mind. Plane crashes are vivid, so we overestimate flying risk. Representativeness. We judge based on stereotypes, ignoring base rates. The Linda problem, feminist bank teller versus just bank teller. Simulation. Mentally replaying scenarios, what ifs, leading to regret. Effect. Judging risk based on our emotional reaction. Scary things feel more probable.
It's fascinating how even Taleb admits to having superstitions despite everything he knows.
It shows how deep this stuff runs. He mentions the Skinner pigeon experiment. Pigeons developing rituals because they associated random actions with random food rewards.
Our brains desperately want to find causal links, even in randomness.
Yes, we assume connections where none exist. Dangerous in science, false positives, negatives, costly in finance.
This connects to the problem of induction and Popper's idea of falsification.
Right, induction. The past doesn't guarantee the future. Just because the sun always rose doesn't mean it must tomorrow, logically speaking.
And falsification. You can only disprove a theory with data, never truly prove it.
Exactly. See, one black swan and all swans are white is finished. A theory that can't be proven wrong isn't science, it's
Charlatanism, as he puts it.
Then there's overconfidence. We think we know more than we do and underestimate the chance of being wrong.
Like those experiments where people were wildly overconfident in their price predictions, failing 30% of the time when they aim for 98% confidence.
Yeah. It means people often take big risks, not from courage, but because they simply underestimate the actual risk involved. They miscalibrate.
He gave that example about the terrorist attack contract, didn't he?
Yes. People choosing the lower probability but higher emotional impact event, market drop due to terrorism, over the higher probability general event, market drop for any reason. Emotion overrides logic in risk assessment.
And finally, nonlinearity. Cause and effect aren't always proportional.
Right. Progress isn't always steady. Think learning piano long plateau, then sudden breakthrough, or a startup toiling, then hitting a tipping point.
So success often goes to those with the mental stamina to endure the long periods of no apparent progress.
Often, yes. Many give up just before the nonlinear rewards kick in. Randomness can even be a nudge, like Burden's ass needing a push to choose between food and water.
Okay, so knowing all this, how do we navigate? Part 4, strategies. Starting with the wax in my ears approach.
Inspired by Odysseus resisting the sirens, he didn't rely on willpower, he used mechanisms. Plugged ears, tied himself up.
And Taleb applies this by not trying to be a hero.
Exactly. He admits he's fooled by randomness, like anyone. So instead of fighting emotions directly, he builds systems to avoid the triggers.
Like avoiding Moo's explanations, filtering opinions, not engaging angry drivers.
Yeah. He knows he's not strong enough to fight his biases head-on, but he's smart enough to know that and plan around it.
Yeah.
Engineer his environment.
Which links to the value of changing your mind. Society pushes for consistency, but
that can be dangerous in a random world. He uses Prost's character, who changed opinions easily because they weren't deeply held.
contrasted with Soros again, who could reverse course instantly without ego.
That adaptability is crucial. Loyalty to a past, wrong opinion is costly. Flexibility is the asset.
Then there's applying Pascal's wager to risk.
Right. Pascal said believe in God because the upside, infinite reward, outweighs the downside. Nothing.
Taleb applies this how?
Use statistics aggressively for bets, big potential upside, but never for risk management, catastrophic potential downside. Don't bet your survival on averages.
Stop losses are a practical example. A preset exit if your theory is falsified.
Yes, a Papyrian tool. But traders often ignore them, convinced the market is wrong until it's too late.
Finally, Stoicism. Grace under pressure.
An ancient philosophy for dealing with randomness. Accept what you can't control, externals. Focus on what you can. Your actions, judgments, reactions.
And heroism isn't about grand victory, but dignity in all circumstances.
That's Taleb's take. Acting with grace, even when facing the worst. His examples are stark.
Being polite when subservience benefits you. Fighting for honor, telling someone you love them but walking away if rejected. Maintaining dignity.
Even facing execution. Wear your best clothes, shave carefully, don't play the victim with illness, don't blame others for your misfortunes, own your reaction.
It's about that inner citadel, right? Maintaining internal control when external events are chaotic. He uses that Cabify poem about Antony.
Yes, the god abandons Antony. It advises accepting defeat with dignity, without denial or false hope. Feel the sorrow, yes, but react with grace, not despair.
Wow. We've covered a lot. How randomness fools us, our biases, the limits of our perception, and then these strategies wax in the ears. Stoicism.
And hopefully this deep dive gives you, the listener, some tools. Tools to navigate a world that's way more random than it looks. The edge isn't predicting the unpredictable.
It's understanding our own limits and building protections.
Exactly. So here's a final thought. If the real challenge isn't the world's randomness, but our own wiring that struggles to grasp it,
then maybe true wisdom isn't about mastering uncertainty out there, but mastering ourselves, our reactions to it.
how might truly accepting that we are fooled by randomness actually liberate us? Free us from those false stories and the emotional roller coaster.
Something to really chew on. Finding peace not by controlling the world, but by controlling our response to it.
Focusing on that inner dignity, judgment, and action in a world that will always, always be random.